Hello and good morning. If you have read the title of this video, I think it's fair to say that you're probably involved in STEM. Maybe you're a high school student who's interested in going to college for STEM. Maybe you are already in STEM. Maybe you're out of school. You're just interested in hearing what I have to say. In any case, watch the video, hang out, and see what you get from it. In this video, I'm going to be making some comments on my past and present relationship with STEM as a mechanical engineering major. Just for clarification, I am still in school, so many of the things that I'm going to be talking about are things that have happened to me in the last 3 to 4 years between the end of high school and present college. In this video, I aim to talk about a lot of the mistakes which I've made throughout school, including some of the ones that have really made me question my major. To end off this introduction, I do find it really important to mention that, once again, I am still in school. Despite all of the mistakes and errors I may have made, and believe me, I've gotten myself into deep shit at times, I am still in school. I'm still working through it. So if you find yourself in a similar boat or some of these things that I talk about sound familiar, you can absolutely still make it. You can still get through it. And if there's something you're able to do to prevent making the same mistake I did or to get yourself out of it sooner than I was able to, by all means, I hope this is able to help you. School is hard. Nothing that we ever do is ever perfect, and most of what we learn comes from trial and error. But look at your errors as learning experiences, Sometimes you can completely bypass that trial and error process if we just coordinate things properly and we listen to each other. We listen to someone else's experience. We're able to learn what someone else did wrong, maybe what they did differently from what you did, and you model your decisions based on that. So with all that being said, you are going to make mistakes. Things are going to happen. Things aren't always going to work out. That's obvious. I just hope that you're able to take some of my mistakes and use them so that you can completely avoid having to make them in the process. And hopefully that'll make your STEM experience much better than mine was. First, I want to start by discussing what's probably the most major error that I would continually make throughout school. This is something that I think most people probably struggle with in one way or another, and it's definitely one of the easiest things to have a solution for, but it's one of the hardest things to actually work on. So here I'm talking about our inner voices, whatever you want to call them. One of the main problems that I was having throughout college is I would have these like pseudo conversations with myself. Not really, but kind of before, during, or after some kind of an interaction. And I managed for a while, I would convince myself that I was like preparing myself for a conversation. Oh, this is going to be like a stressful interaction, and I want to make sure I know what to say. And that's why I did it. And that's how I managed to convince myself that it was somehow helpful. So a lot of the time it would just be like a what if, what if somebody says this when I'm talking to them? What if this happens, this random day, to prepare myself for whatever outcome. And they were always things that would never actually happen. And I was quite literally worrying about a conflict that didn't exist when there was no reason to worry. Now, by absolutely no means would I call myself introverted. If you asked me a year ago, 2 years ago, I probably would have said that I was. I don't actually believe that anybody is inherently introverted. Human beings are not introverted as a species, right? We're a social species. That's how we survive and exist. So it wouldn't make sense for human beings to be introverted. I think that's something that you tell yourself because it's comfortable, or it's easy to believe. Now, I believe that by having these internal conversations and even believing that we're introverted is allowing these voices to grow stronger. Now, I guess that not all internal voices are necessarily really bad, but none of them are necessary or helpful. I mentioned earlier with the whole conversation preparation thing, there really isn't anything that they're going to do for you. By this point, if you're still kind of confused with what I mean when I say internal voice, I'm not actually talking about voices. If you have voices in your head, that is another problem. I more so just mean like overthinking a situation. You have that little voice that's telling you, oh, I don't know. Think of some random, usually things that aren't good, right? You're overthinking something. You're thinking that you look bad or anything. These people think I'm stupid. Just something like that, right? And you're really just overthinking things. Things are worse in your own mind. This should seem pretty obvious by this point, I know it's really redundant, but a lot of people don't fully understand that. And, it's funny enough, but what we hear in our heads most of the time, at least, is really just there to piss us off. I've heard of people using it as a motivator sometimes, but I really do think it's just easier to ignore it. The way that I like to look at it is it's like that one dude that everyone knows who's just really annoying for one reason or another. Maybe he says some really wildly inappropriate stuff, or he's just all around irritating and a nuisance. I don't know. But everyone knows a dude like that, and every time you see him, you try your best to just avoid him. You're going out with friends. Oh, can I come too? Yeah, no, we were actually just going to go home. Because you don't want to deal with them. And it's like sometimes you feel bad depending on your actual relationship with the person, but most of the time it's just a person you really don't want to be around. And why? Because he makes you miserable. It's the exact same thing with that voice that you've got going on. You really just got to ignore it and not spend time with it, because why would you? Why would you spend time around something that's really making you miserable? Now, if you're watching this video, it's more than likely that you're at least somewhat familiar with philosophy. If you aren't, that's all right. If you are, that's good. By no means am I a philosopher. I'm just a dude who's dealt with shit like anyone else. So Lao Tzu, probably one of the most famous philosophers of all time, he was the founder of Taoism, once said, "Stop thinking and end your problems." And again, this seems like something that should be so easy, but yet it's extremely difficult. Now, remember the name Lao Tzu. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. I'm going to reference him again in this video. Now, I always used to tell myself things like, these people think I'm weird, or what'll people think if they see me doing this? Shit like that, right? Before even making this video, I had the consideration of, what if my friends and family somehow find the video on YouTube, in which case, like, nothing, like, it doesn't even really matter. But, like, random silly things to the point that, it's like, why am I worried about this? Why am I worried necessarily about what this other person thinks? Because even if they think something bad, they're going to think something bad for 20 seconds and then, oh, well, right? It really just proves the irrelevance of how someone else might view me. The people around you who care about you and they genuinely like you, want to spend time with you, there's a reason why they do. And that reason really has nothing to do with your internalized thought of them or of yourself. One thing that I do really want to get clear, though, is your internal voice, the power that it has, is really determined by the power that you give it. It's like adding fuel to a fire. The fire isn't actually sentient, but you are. If you, the sentient being, keeps adding fuel, wood, to this fire, it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The only way to put it out is just by walking away and ignoring it. The voice isn't actually sentient at all. You're the only sentient being in this situation. Right? If you keep fueling the voice, you keep giving it what it needs to grow, it will continue to grow. The only way that it's going to stop is if you stop fueling it. Once you've stopped feeding it, the voice is still going to try to reach you. It is still a burning fire, but it is significantly smaller. And as it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, it is going to have less impact on you. One thing that I'd like to clarify is the voice has not completely gone away from me. It's kind of like a pilot light, imagine, and like a grill or some shit, right? It's always going to be there, but it's not a roaring fire. And it's kind of funny now that it's as small as it is, it's as insignificant as it is, I kind of make fun of it. Now, regardless of where I am now at this point, that's a small part of this video, but not the main topic. That voice was able to define the majority of what I did and did not do throughout college. It managed to convince me that people would only like me once I conformed to their standards. So I shifted through several personalities, several different styles, just so that I can fit in with these groups that I didn't really know I wanted to be a part of anyways. After a while, I started to realize that none of the people I was talking to in these groups were people who I would ever naturally be friends with. I dated a couple of the chicks from these groups too, and I managed to convince myself then that they were what I wanted in a girlfriend, which was the furthest thing from the truth. Now, it took me a while to realize it, but basically everything that I had done trying to connect with these people in these groups was just meaningless. I was always the odd one out despite looking the part and playing the role, because I was lying. You'd be surprised, but people are really perceptive, especially women for some reason. I have no idea why. But in most cases, they were able to tell that I was being disingenuous. If I had actually really wanted to be friends with these people, I think I would have been better off just being genuine. So I promised another quote from Lao Tzu, so here it is. Must you value what others value, avoid what others avoid? How ridiculous. It wasn't immediate, it took me a decently long amount of time to figure this out. But eventually I realized that faking your character, me faking my character to spend time with people who I had absolutely nothing in common with was really kind of silly. If you think about it long and hard with all the information spread across the table, it really is ridiculous. One, I didn't even particularly like any of these people. I just had them on some kind of a pedestal, like they were the mental image of a person that I wanted to be. Two, the things that I was changing about myself were so major that it probably wouldn't have even been possible for me to hold that act for that long. And three, the people were able to tell that I was being disingenuous, which probably made me look weirder in the long run. All of these really did just put me in a worse relationship with the people around me. They did the reverse of what I was trying to do, and it was all just because I was overthinking things. So I'm going to be moving on. Those two were very related. This is moving on to something a little bit more distant, but still connected. That's why they're in this video. First, I'd like to make a reference from the book of Matthew. It is the 7th chapter. Whether or not I know it's probably not only going to be Christians watching this video. I am personally a Christian, but I do still feel that it is an important quote. So for many of you who are familiar with the reference, judge not that ye not be judged. Bob Marley has a song referencing it, so you might also be familiar with it from there. If not from the biblical quote, I would imagine more people would probably be familiar with the biblical quote. But one of the biggest struggles which I've had through my early years were issues of judgment. I would spend a lot of my time when walking day to day, and I would look at people and I would make harsh judgments based on their clothing, maybe some of their behavior, and anything that would have stood out, and I was judging them pretty harshly. I feel like most of these judgments probably came out of my outlook of myself, some of the judgments that I would be making internally. It's hard to admit, but it would make sense for that to be some form of internal reflection. I feel like by having these harsh thoughts of the people around me, I would tend to assume what they were thinking about me. More often than not, the kind of thoughts that I would imagine them having about me were usually harsher than anything that I would be thinking about them. Now, it took me a while to figure this out, and I kind of hate to have to admit that, but it really did build a kind of self-sustaining fire right in my head where, if you've ever heard somebody say, what you consume is what you put out. I was consuming these hateful, bad thoughts, that I thought people, not genuinely, I thought people were thinking this, but I was imagining people thinking this stuff about me, and I was consuming that. I was consuming that idea, and then I was putting out all these harsh thoughts against them and other people, and it was just getting worse and worse and worse. It was a self-sustaining fire, and it only grew. It took me a while to figure it out, but I needed to metaphorically starve the fire. You'd imagine that since I was the one producing 100% of the fuel, that would be easy, right? But no, it wasn't. I'd say, though, it was only difficult because it took me such a long time to figure out what the actual origin of the problem was. For me, that origin was always something that I was or was not doing. It was always easier for me to make an excuse, to remove my responsibility, to blame someone else, but that was only building more hatred. That was not anything that was helping me in any way, shape, or form. If this sounds like you, remember that you can always put that fire out. Theoretically, a fire is never too big to put out, but what do you think is going to be easier to extinguish, a match or a forest fire? In this case, a fire will also destroy everything that it runs through, but once again, it's up to you. It's up to you how much it destroys. It's up to you how much rebuilding you actually need to do to fix it. Just be prepared for the process of recovery. You'll be tempted to fall back into the same pattern like I have many times. Just know that all the voices inside of you that are telling you you're not good enough, this guy over there looks like an idiot, it's okay to hate people because they're all assholes anyway. Know that they're your internalized fire and they're as big as you're making them. And all that stuff, the voices, the fire, whatever analogy you want to use, it's going to work as hard as it can to destroy you, to bring you down. And the only thing that is allowing that to happen is you. The first thing that you need to do is you need to step in, you need to make the change. And I don't necessarily have the answers for that. And really nobody actually has the answers for that. That's just something that you got to figure out. And that's the truth of it. By no means am I a psychologist, but I've spoken to a psychologist and I've gotten more or less the same answers. There's a lot to be said about just what you can do yourself. It's a matter of really just finding the origin of those problems and working to fix them. Believe it or not, that's actually all I've got to talk about today. I'm aware that this video wasn't as much about STEM as I would have liked to have made it, but I more so just meant it as like an introduction to a difficult major, introduction to STEM, sciences, anything like that, since that's what I'm doing. There aren't very many people on YouTube who talk about this kind of stuff who are STEM majors, at least not from what I was able to see. There's a lot of them, but a lot of them are specifically YouTube, or they're actually, it seems like the majority of them are like specifically YouTube. I know there's the one guy that I watch, and I'm pretty sure he said he dropped out of college and he just pursued YouTube because that's what he wanted to do anyway. And he is one of the main people who I pay attention to on this platform. But it's a little bit difficult sometimes because there are problem-specific problems, you know, I don't know what you'd call them, but something that I feel like are more specific to a STEM or a science major, where you are going through some very stressful shit. And I guess it could help to hear that someone else is in your same boat, or you're going to be in that same boat, and you kind of just want to know what's up. I actually had, I originally tried making this video before, and it was going to be a lot more than 15, 20 minutes, you know, it was like 40 minutes long or something. So I actually omitted a lot of content, and I held back on a lot of personal stories. I do plan on making more videos in the future, so if this is something that you guys want to hear again, you want me to revisit some stuff, maybe some specific things that I would think about people, or specific stories that I've had throughout school, maybe my interactions with people or whatever, let me know. I can tell those stories. Maybe I'll make a video specifically about them if that's of interest, and you know, can provide some kind of guidance if that's helpful. I do plan on making some more videos where I get into philosophy, but more so than just that, I'm very passionate about engineering. That's, you know, I really do view that as my calling, as cheesy as that sounds. So I do also plan on making some more like tutoring oriented videos, probably more as I enter my my school semesters, because right now I'm on winter break. But as I enter semesters, I'll probably do tutoring to the things that are relevant, so I can solidify the ideas in my own head. I've known that to be very helpful in the past. But I also want to make, you know, as I said, some more philosophy-based videos, and also when I work on a project, because I make shit all the time. I'll upload some stuff, you know, step by step, maybe if people want to follow along, or I'll just go over what I did, you know, my sketches, everything like that. Again, thanks to all you for watching the video. You know, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like the video, share it, you know, do whatever you want to do. Thanks for watching the video, especially if you watched it to the end. God bless all of you. Thank you, guys. I hope you were able to get something out of this.